don't know. I don't want to be. That's too much responsibility for one person.
Following on from that, then in your role, you're obviously very senior in the UK and sort of at a certain point. How would you say that you inspire expertise in FanDuel?
That's assuming I'm an expert. Yeah, I think it goes back to what I was talking about before, is that celebrating of failure, making it clear that it's absolutely fine to make mistakes, and that I mean I really do think that's part of your journey to being an expert, is you have to make mistakes. If you never suffer those kind of setbacks, there's a sort of resilience missing that I think you build up, and a sort of like mechanism that you maybe don't create within yourself to say, okay, something's gone wrong. How do I take a step back from that? It's okay that it's gone wrong, and just, not feel that it's, that the sky's falling around me or something. I think you've got to go through some failures, because you always feel like the first time something goes wrong, when, remember bringing production down multiple times throughout my career. You can't really bring production down in the same way anymore. But yeah, like I think it's one of those ones where you have to be able to, as a leader, just say, hey, look, it's absolutely fine. Like, let's make sure that we'll get together, we'll have a talk about it, not in a way that names or anything like that. It's much more objective, it's much more factual. Talk about how we kind of move, we learn from those failures and move forward as a team. And then I think it's also talking about, all those things that we just mentioned, right? Like all the resources that are available to people, and make sure that they recognize that that's all there, that we are investing in them, making sure that people take their time and to have downtime. You can't run at something constantly and get better. You do need to make space for yourself, and as managers and leaders, I think it's important that we ensure that people do take that headspace and they do go on holiday. Certainly there's a minimum law in the UK. We have flexible holiday allowance, so we don't actually have like a sort of max on our holiday here, and making sure that when you take those holidays, go away, go do something else. If you want to do a project or something, cool, that's absolutely fine. We do hackathons as well, and the leadership team all gets involved in that, whether they are part of the teams and writing code. I can still write code. I'll tell everyone that. Make sure that I remind them of that.
Get that in there.
Yeah, obviously. But yeah, I think like the hackathons are a big one. We try and do at least 2 a year, and that's where the leadership team come along. We'll help. We give out prizes, we help judge those things, and try and pick the winners, as it were, although everyone's a winner, right, if you do a hackathon. And a lot of those, we've had multiple projects that we've done as part of hackathons actually go out into production, and it's like an entire company thing as well. It's not just an engineering thing, it's everyone gets involved, from commercial to design to the product managers to the engineers themselves and the testers. And it also gives you a really good opportunity to swap hats and let someone try out something else, a different role, and see how they feel about it. So I think that's really cool. I think as well, being able to stand up as a leader and say that you don't know everything, and making sure that it is one of the things that I like to do, and I think a lot of the leaders, if not all the leaders in FanDuel, do this, is making sure that you recognize other people. It's not, you don't stand up and say, hey, like, we did this thing and it's great. It's much more, I do think it's powerful, and it's important to name the people who really put a lot of time and effort into this stuff, thank them publicly, make sure that people, that we're also encouraging those types of people to come forward and give talks, right? Like, you don't want to just hear from me talking about how I used to write code 3 years ago and how I still do it today. It's really important that we make sure that, and I think within FanDuel, so many of the people are great that it requires very little prompting, but making sure that we have our lead engineers and our principal engineers giving talks, and not just on technical things. I know Jamie and I have like two sides of the same coin in our talk around how FanDuel got to where it is today, and I focused on like a sort of like cultural, and like, here's what our offices looked like, and here's like the employee growth over time, and Jamie's got like the sort of like we kind of like interweave into that stuff, and he talks more about like the technology at the time and like how that kind of came along, but also mistakes that we all made at the time, and Jamie owns his part in those, and I own my part in those, and I think that's important. So Jamie's my counterpart for the area that we look after. Jamie's much more on the kind of the hands-on side, leading the engineers in terms of what good looks like around coding and architecture and solving the hard problems, which I get to sidestep, and Jamie solves them for us, which is great. So I think it's not just about being that sole individual, and you are the kind of like the beacon of all the virtues of leadership or expertise, but it's about making sure that everybody gets to take a step forward, and that things are ran by different people. Like the hackathon, I didn't arrange the hackathon, right? We've got a group of people, some who are new to the company, some who've been here a long time, all at different stages in their career, who've arranged that as a group. And I like I've been involved, very very keen. They've done a fantastic job. But I think being a leader is also making sure that you don't try and do everything yourself, and that you do make those opportunities available to other people. One of the things we've been talking about recently is it's a very competitive time in the industry. I think it always has been. So it is hard to, get experience, certainly in the volumes that we would like them to get, experienced individuals. And again, making sure that we are very clear about where there are opportunities to people to step up and step into, and that we have the support networks in place when they do choose to do that, and even changing the way that we work slightly to enable that. So, one of the things we've been doing, for right or wrong, is we kind of have a cookie cutter model of about 8 engineers in a team with an SEM, and then maybe 1 or 2 quality engineers alongside it. And one of the things we're looking at more recently is the jump from like being a senior engineer where you're designing features, to lead engineer where you're responsible for the services and kind of like reviewing all the individual features that the senior engineers are producing. That's quite a big jump when there's 8 people in a team or 7 other people in a team. So I actually started to talk about making smaller teams, so that it's 2 or 3 engineers in a team, and we can have more people step up, and it's not such a sort of dam break and all the water falls on you as you kind of like struggle to cope with all these different features coming in. But it's much more of a, hey, let's try and design this better so that we are making those opportunities more available to people and talking about them more. So that's pretty new. I think we came up with the idea a couple of weeks ago, and we're probably going to launch it in the next 2 weeks and see how that happens. So
fast turnaround.
I know, right? We're good at fast turnarounds at FanDuel. And I think it's one of those ones where nobody's been precious about it or worried about it. We can experiment with different things. Sometimes they work, sometimes they don't. But it's important that when we do experiment with things like this, like I said, we are going to give people those opportunities. It's really important that we support them properly. We can't just throw people into a team, leave them, try to deal with all the torrential water that's falling on them, and then kind of go, oh, well, that didn't work, so we won't do that again. It's got to be something that we all commit to and we all support. So yeah, put
the right frameworks and stuff in place so that they succeed.
Absolutely. Yeah, and I think that, speaking of frameworks, not necessarily our favorite thing, frameworks and process. We try to err on the side of having just enough process around things, but conversations with your line manager, and the line manager starting conversations around how you're doing, like giving you timely feedback. Like one of the things that we try to do is we do have like a set sort of schedule for compensation review and rating review and all that sort of stuff, like most companies, but we try to be very real time underneath that. Like while those things happen, because we're a big company and you have to be able to set points in the year for that, we do try and make sure that people get feedback as soon as possible, good and bad. Like it's got to be constructive feedback. It's got to come with a sort of path forward and a sort of learning that is worked on together. I think that's really important as well, that we do have that immediate feedback, those opportunities for people to learn on the fly, and that it's not sort of like bottled up and delivered later in the year when it's almost irrelevant at that point, right? Like if a situation's passed, waiting takes too long. And I think that goes back to being an expert as well. You're only going to be an expert if you do get that feedback constantly, and you do understand the areas of growth that you have or the challenges that you have in front of you. And sometimes that doesn't just go, I did use the example of manager to line report, but we do 360 feedback, right? Like you can go and source your own feedback. You can ask someone else to gather it for you. But it comes from everyone around you. And it's not just, if I'm an engineer, I just get feedback from the engineers. It's from your commercial stakeholders and your product managers as well. And it's very rounded, right? It covers all aspects of being an engineer. It's not just your code and how it works in production, but it's how you interact with other departments. It's how you prioritize. It's how you have conversations with people who might not be technical. and are responsible for more of the business side of things, and you're trying to explain like the fastest way or the best way to implement something without using like phrases and terminology or technology that people probably don't have anything to relate to on those fronts. So
being able to translate it.
yeah, exactly. Yeah. So I think that stuff's really important.
Amazing. Well, thanks so much for your time today, Matt.
Thank you for having me. Thanks for asking all the questions.
Thanks.
There we go.
Thank you so much, Matt.
Thank you.